I went to make an intro with the teeth meme.
Mm-hmm.
It's just a text meme. I can hear it in my head.
Yeah.
I swore
Same.
it was from some sketch television show or something, a sketch comedy show.
Mm-hmm.
But nope, it's just a tweet.
Yep.
That just says teeth a bunch. So I don't know if that would translate to an intro.
I think it would translate pretty well.
People just chanting teeth?
Yeah.
Alright, well, I don't know when you're actually ready, so let's just get into it. Welcome to
your favorite podcast episode.
Welcome to another brand new episode of Lucky Paper Radio. My name is Andy. I'm here as always with my co-host Anthony. Not really a snack buyer, Maddox.
I'm really not a snack buyer. I kind of wish I was a better snack buyer. Part of it is I'm usually grocery shopping by bicycle, so snacks just take up a lot of space.
Do they?
I think so.
Okay. I'm a really good snack eater.
Okay.
And because of that, I have to be a diligent snack buyer to not buy that many snacks.
Oh, I thought you were going to say to buy a lot of snacks so you
no,
can keep it in
the problem
balance.
is I would just eat them all. So, got to work on that.
Snacks.
Snacks.
Everybody loves snacks.
Not you, really.
I'll snack on them if they're around.
This is going to be a fun little more casual episode. We're just going to talk about some updates to our cubes over the past, for me it's like a year, basically. I've been changing my cube a little bit, every set that comes out, or just, otherwise, as my evaluations and goals change, and never is it really, worth a whole topic on an episode, and we get, tastes of it here and there with the set review episodes, but I thought it'd be good to check in, because I have stuff to say about cards in my cube that are unrelated to recent sets that don't really make for an entire episode, but maybe we cobble this all together. My cube, your cubes, we'll just, have a conversation about our changing evaluations of our cube environments.
Yeah, the rate at which I have been changing my main cube has definitely been slowing down. I remember when I first built it and we drafted it the first time, I think I probably changed 50 cards or something huge after the first draft.
You're like, that's it, new cube.
New cube, basically. But now it's it's in a pretty good place. There are some targeted areas that I'm trying to alter the gameplay a little bit here and there, or, some card that's really, really perfect for it comes out in a new set and I'll change it. But it's definitely been tapering off how much I really want to change it, which I think ultimately means that my cube curation effort is just going to be directed towards new projects, but it's always just going to change a little bit over time.
Plus, I made that cube update jingle a year and a half ago, and I figured that would be a regular segment on the podcast, but we don't really end up doing segments, and so I wanted an excuse to use that again.
Cube update, cube update, cube update, cube update. We could do more segments if you want.
It's hard. I feel like the way we plan our episodes does not naturally result in a segment-based show. Maybe
because we don't plan on segments, and we just go off on tangents too much and then don't talk about stuff that we plan to talk about.
No, first of all, we don't actually do that much, but also tangents are good. My ideal version of this podcast is we basically don't plan anything at all. We just sit down and talk about Magic every week.
Oh, that's great, because that's exactly what I did.
Okay, great. Perfect. Do you want to go first? Should I go first? Where should we start talking about things we've changed our mind on? The cards that have been over or underperforming, just, observations about our own cube lives.
Go for it.
Okay, great. I'll start off, and I want to talk mostly about the Bun Magic Cube today. I have a couple little Degenerate Micro Cube things, but mostly Bun Magic Cube stuff. And first off, I just want to do a Baneslayer check-in. We did a whole episode where I was talking about trying to introduce more 3-mana and up threats that did not provide value in the face of removal, with the goal of making that card type more viable in my environment, and also making the removal better, just so my environment played a little more in that space. And the elephant in the room is definitely Sheoldred the Apocalypse, I think, for sure.
The giant centipede lady.
Yeah.
Just kind of like an elephant.
That was a little addendum at the very end of that episode where I was like, oh yeah, and also I'm going to add Sheoldred. That'll be the last slot. And I did it knowing that the card, if it sticks, kind of takes over a whole game, and the game becomes entirely about it, knowing that it requires no building around, though it does benefit, I think, from specific card interactions. If you do have Treasure Cruise and stuff, the card is better, certainly.
Sure. Treasure Cruise makes a lot of cards better.
Though the baseline of it is excellent without any building around whatsoever.
Yeah, that reminds me of the topic we've talked about in the past that Sam Black brought up, talking about the design of low-powered cubes and how a lot of people include cards that sort of, when you look at the structure of the card, feels like it is a synergistic piece that interacts with something. The thing that he brought up specifically was Fable of the Mirror Breaker, which a lot of people included in cubes as an enchantment matters, or token matters, or attacking matters piece. but turns out the card is just a beating. Like, the floor is so high, those synergies kind of don't really matter. And I feel like Sheoldred is in a similar place where, yeah, you can build around it, but
to be clear, it's not synergistic. I'm just saying that, like, it can interact with cards in your deck in a novel way.
With cards, that is true.
I mean, some cards can't do that, right? Like, I was talking on stream the other day about Mu Yanling, which is not a particularly good card, but also has essentially zero interactivity with any card in my entire cube. It's like, it's a Planeswalker that protects itself a little bit and turns into an air elemental. It's such a, like, generic good stuff card that I think it's on the cutting block for me. Like, I can't think of any card where it's like, oh, I have Mu, I'm going to draft this more highly, or vice versa.
Yeah, and I think that's important to sort of keep that in mind about your own goals for this cube, is you do want, I think one of the things you really strive for is, like, maximizing the decision space during the draft as much as possible. You don't ever want to open up a pack and think, like, yep, this is the pick order for these cards. You want it all to be about how do these cards interact with everything else that I've picked in my pool so far, or might be picking down the line. So, yeah, I mean, those kinds of cards don't necessarily contribute to that goal.
Yeah, and Sheoldred also is very much in this space. I acknowledge that it is just a good card. I mean, I think we're going to cover a lot of space that we've been talking about a little bit on our stream. So if you've been watching the stream, this might be a little bit of rehashing for you, but we haven't talked about this stuff on the podcast, and I think it's good to have more dedicated space for it. Which reminds me, I had 2 people this week, Anthony, 2 separate people say, oh, I had no idea that you were on YouTube and making videos, and they're actually good. So go check out our YouTube channel if you haven't. I promise they're good videos.
It's actually good.
It's actually good, I promise. And people that are regular listeners to the podcast that are like, I never even knew you had this. Yeah, I thought I talk about it too much, but I probably am overly conscious of that. Go check out our YouTube page if you haven't already. Anyway, we experienced this, I think, to the max when we were playing Jay's Cube, where we had a match where I had Sheoldred in my deck, and I just played Sheoldred in 2 games, and that was the only game actions I took that mattered whatsoever. In one game, it was kind of important that I cast a Toxic Deluge first, but actually after, because it had 5 toughness, so I could go Sheoldred into Toxic Deluge. But for the most part, those games were just entirely defined by your deck's inability to deal with Sheoldred, and that's definitely something that is possible in the Bun Magic Cube, and it has been a very polarizing card. Games have definitely revolved around Sheoldred in the way that I guess anticipated they would.
It's funny because as much as this is not serving some of your cube goals, Magic is complicated and you have a lot of goals you're trying to sort of resolve all at once, and this idea of having Baneslayers be meaningful so that removal matters is all present to and contributes to this. The other thing that feels like it is sort of in opposition to your goals is you actually really hate the card Klothys, and to me this feels really similar, where it's just sort of this, like,
what I don't like about Klothys is the uninteractivity of it.
You could exile it when somebody gets, 7 devotion to green and red?
Yeah, sure, I guess. Like I said, uninteractive. I mean, this is just a creature. It dies to any of the removal that doesn't care about toughness, which admittedly is a decent bit of it, but there's lots of removal spells in my queue before Sheoldred. Also, you could force them to block with it and just, also add a shock to it to kill it. Like, it is way more susceptible and interactive than something like Klothys is. And I do run more removal in my cube than a cube like Jay's, which is where we saw this particularly, I would say, toxic play pattern. I should say, if it's not obvious, I do not want games to play out like those games we played in Jay's cube. No slight of Jay or anything or his cube, but just to observe, that is the kind of gameplay I do not want Sheoldred to lead to. And I've definitely heard from some players that, like, that is definitely a possibility or has happened once or twice with Sheoldred. Now, some of that might just be the meta needing to readjust, right? Like, I think for a long time, my cube has not had anything resembling a Baneslayer in it at all. So players, I think, are kind of low on things like Heartless Act and whatever, these hard removal spells that are maybe a little overcosted compared to your Blood Chief's Thirst and your Fatal Pushes, but that can actually answer Sheoldred. You can actually push Sheoldred, I guess, too, if something left the battlefield, because it does go up to 4 mana value. But
true.
I think people are a little low on those now that Sheoldred is in the environment. But the counter to that is that if there's literally only one card that you need those hard removal spells for, then it's not actually worth changing your evaluations, because the chance you play against that one card is so low.
Right.
But they're also good in other places. They're just maybe not as good as, a lightning bolt. It's all complicated. All this to say that I think Sheoldred is ridiculously powerful, and I've definitely seen some people say that, oh, I didn't think this card was any good. If you're playing a power-motivated cube and you just care about running the most powerful Magic cards, or that is one of your major goals, you should definitely be playing this card, I think, in any size. The card is really, really messed up. I don't know where I'm going to land on it, but I did want to observe that it has been doing the thing. It has been a very potent Baneslayer. I think the most potent of any of the Baneslayers I added has been definitely making waves, and so that is something to observe, and I have my eye on it.
What are the other Baneslayers that you've added?
We did a whole episode where I added like 10. Don't you remember that episode?
Yeah, we talked through a bunch of things you were considering and narrowed down the list, right?
Yeah, I think we added 6 or 8 or something there. We're going to cover more of them. So the next one that comes to mind for me is Irencrag Pyromancer. This is the 0-4 for 2 in a red that when you draw your second card a turn, you can bolt anything. And this card, I think, has been good. It's been good for me when I've played it in my decks. Players have reported that it's been good for them. I definitely don't think it's a top-tier card draw or spells matter payoff, but it's very good. It's like definitely very playable, I think, in this environment. And part of it is that 3 damage kills almost any threat in my environment, right? As someone pointed out on YouTube in a comment that it probably wouldn't be as good in an environment where you're playing things like Grave Titan and stuff like that. And that's true. My cube does not curve up to like 5 and 6 drops, so it's not going to get outclassed in that way. 3 damage is going to be irrelevant at any point in the game. And just like, little interactions. I had a deck we played on stream where I combined it with Sensei's Divining Top, and that's just every turn you draw your card for turn and also a generic mana bolt, right? You draw 2 cards a turn. One of them is a generic mana for a bolt, and the other one is whatever card you were going to draw anyway. And that's ridiculously powerful. So it has really cool interactions with cards like that. It was one of the cards that, of the ones we talked about, people were lowest on. Like people I polled on Twitter and asked our play group were lowest on in terms of the expected power level, and I think it's dramatically overperformed those expectations.
Yeah, I mean, I think especially just like a 3-mana 0-4 looks really, really bad. And even if you call it like a 3-mana 3-4 unblockable is kind of a weird card, but that's really not what it is. Like, it has the ability to go to face and just like actually end a game, but it also just has a huge presence on any board, and you can actually trigger it twice if you have ways to draw 2 cards on your opponent's turn as well. So the ceiling is really, really high. Yeah,
so I think that card's cool. It's sticking around for a while. It's been one of the cards I've been most happy about from this batch of editions. A card that has performed exactly as anticipated, but I just want to remark on briefly, is Adeline Resplendent Cathar. Some people think this is just like exactly as good as Brimaz, and I'm here to tell you, and I can confirm, we suspected this, it is so much better than Brimaz. Like, the cards, I don't even think are that comparable. So, Adeline's been performing really well. The card's great, and definitely matches the goals laid out.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that it can make a token the turn it comes down, it doesn't itself have to attack to keep making tokens, and actually just turns into a huge threat on its own.
Yeah, the ceiling is way higher.
Adds up to a lot. That Brimaz, yeah, kind of just does a single linear thing.
I have been attacked by a 7-power Adeline. That has happened in my cube, so it's a really good card. One card that is underperformed, I think, pretty notably, is Torens, Fist of the Angels. I was skeptical about this one. I added it because I was interested and curious, and it's one of the only ones everyone has reported, like, yeah, this card is just awful. It doesn't work. It doesn't do the thing it's supposed to do. And I actually, thinking about it more, I think that card is kind of missing something. Obviously, context always matters, and it was probably fine and limited, but the card does feel like it needs another something to make it actually do what it purports to do on the card, right? Like, give it 3 toughness or, something. As is, a 2/2 that spits out 1/1s that maybe can get bigger if you have profitable attacks with either of them. It's just not good enough.
Fair. I'm putting it on my new cube list right now.
Because I think that card would honestly be like totally fine in like the regular cube, for example. Yeah, absolutely.
Because my Selesnya section in that cube is always looking for more cards.
I know you're stacked up on those, but just to like, that's my way of like explaining where I think the power level of that card actually has landed.
Okay.
Is I think it plays like you would expect an uncommon build around to play in limited. In
Interesting.
reality.
I mean, it just does look so powerful in a context where you're just playing like a curve out Selesnya creature deck.
I mean, does it? Like, okay, so how many tokens do you have to make before you're like, this is a bomb?
I mean, because you're obviously losing
3.
tempo, I was going to say 2, but yeah, 3 is probably more likely.
I think 3 is where you're like, this was a very good card in my deck. I think 2, you're like maybe breaking even. You make 1, and it's like not that great for 3 mana. So the card is just not that great, and I kind of suspected that. I thought maybe it would have a fun ceiling because I do just love stuff that happens when you do other stuff, triggers when you cast spells or draw cards. I think it's just part of the fun of Magic. You get to build your own little engine and feel smart and cool, but the power level's not there for that card, at least for my cube, so that one's going to be shown the door shortly too, I think. Then there are 2 other Baneslayers, quote-unquote, that I added actually well before we did our Baneslayer edition episode that I also wanted to touch on that have also been performing pretty well for us. One is Serra Paragon. That's the 4-mana 3/4 flyer that once a turn you can play a permanent card or spell. I know you can play lands with it too. I'm not sure how it's worded. Out of your yard with mana value 3 or less. Oh gosh, can you give me the rules text? You're looking at a computer. Anyway, it's got this like Lurrus-esque ability on a 3/4 flyer for 4, which has the Baneslayer problem, right? Like, unless you play it on 5 mana, you're not likely to get value off it the turn it comes down, though you can play lands with it, right?
Yeah, so it's a 4 mana, 3/4 flyer, and once during each of your turns, you may play a land from your graveyard or cast a permanent spell with mana value 3 or less from your graveyard.
Okay, so I got it all there. So you can get, like, a fetch land back at least on turn 4 with this thing. So it gives you some value, even if it's not a whole lot. But it does, if
well,
you get...
on turn 4, if you've already played your 4th land in order to cast it.
That is true, not if you've already played your 4th land for turn. So that is true. So yeah, the card does generally require that you untap with it, and I actually haven't played with it or against it myself in the, I don't know, when was DMU? Like 4 months ago, 5 months ago at this point?
What is time?
I have no idea. I haven't played with it myself in the time it's been in my cube, but I've had multiple players report that, yeah, the card is really good if you get to the late game and are just looking for resources, which makes sense. Obviously, it makes sense to say that the card is good if you're like in the late game and have extra mana floating around. Like, the card's going to be good there, but the question is like, does that circumstance reliably happen or happen enough in this cube that the card feels okay to cast? And the feedback from the play group has been yes, definitely. I haven't heard anybody be like, this card is bad or whatever. I've just heard people say that, yeah, the card is good and cool. And I do like the play patterns. I like that you can buy stuff back. I like that it combines with the other spells you've cast in a novel way, right? Because it's kind of like it has a once a turn triggered ability or something, or activated ability you can pay for. It's just that what that actual ability is contingent on the cards in your graveyard, which means you can do cool novel stuff with it. The one thing I don't love about it is like the templating of it, the fact that you like when it would go somewhere else, it's instead exiled and you gain 2 life. I could do without the life gain and that sort of weird templating if you could just like, I don't know, make a token of it or something the same way you would with like Eternalize. It's kind of strange, but the card is cool, it works, and I'm going to keep that in for a while too. One last card that has really impressed me, and I think perhaps suffers from a comparison bias, is Scourge of the Skyclaves. So all the way back to Zendikar Rising, 2.5 years ago, whenever that was, this is the 1 in a black card that's templated like Death's Shadow, but instead its power and toughness is the difference between 20 and the highest life total amongst you and your opponent. It sounds complicated. If, whoever has higher life total, its power is 20 minus that number. In my cube with tons of shock lands and lots of fetch lands and lots of aggressive strategies, this card is very reliably an extremely good Tarmogoyf, right? It's a 2 mana. I even had a game on stream where my opponent played, a 2 mana 6/7 Tarmogoyf, and I was like, here's a 2 mana 8/8 Scourge of the Skyclaves. Now we're playing 2 mana giant creatures. What are you going to do about it? I did lose that game, but it wasn't because of Scourge not pulling its weight. So I think this card's really good. I put it in there alongside Death Shadow. I do play Death Shadow right now, and Death Shadow is definitely not as good, I think, in this kind of environment. That card really demands that your deck be committed to lowering your own life total, I think, to be playable or to be very good. Because if you're in a control matchup and you just have a Death Shadow, it's entirely possible that you just don't get your life total below 13 with your own lands and stuff in my deck, and you just can't play your threat. Right. And that's pretty bad. This card, you can, just lower your own life total a few points. You get to play it when you're at 16. It's still a 2 mana 4/4. That's great. And then obviously the ceiling goes up from there. So I think given that it's similar to Death Shadow aesthetically, people probably lump it together of like, oh, if you have a Death Shadow deck, you want both of these. But I think you can definitely just play Scourge of the Skyclaves in any black deck that wants 2-drop creatures, as long as your environment is kind of similar to mine in terms of being low curving, taking some life from your mana base. The card's just good.
Yeah, I think that this is going to play very differently in different environments. In your cube, there's just like, even the slowest, earliest decks, their life total is going to start dropping pretty quickly because of just the density of shock lands and, I don't know, just sort of the way that decks are structured and the tempo of things. And you have very little life gain, so there's very little risk of this just, suddenly dying to somebody gaining a bunch of life.
I actually don't think I have what I would call very little life gain. It's there. There is definitely life gain in the environment. I think people always think I run like none of it because I am historically a little bit critical of life gain when I see it on a card. If a card has lifelink or some sort of recurring life gain, it's oftentimes something I will avoid. But I've got cards that gain a fair amount of life. You're doing a search on Cube Cobra right now, I can tell. How many cards is it? Do you want me to guess?
Yeah, do a guess. What's the right way to search for this? Let me read a card.
I think if you just search for gain, life, I don't think I have anything that triggers when your opponent gains life or something. You can pretty easily weed out the other ones. I would guess there's probably like 24 cards that gain life in the cube of some sort.
Yeah, there's some it's a little bit tricky to search for because lifelink isn't going to have those words, but I think
I don't think there's anything with lifelink in the cube.
It's about a dozen. There is at least one.
What has lifelink?
Intrepid Adversary has lifelink. So does Luris, actually.
Right, Lurrus,
Forget
obviously.
about Lurrus.
Okay, so there's 2 cards with lifelink. That's true. So there's cards there that gain life. It's not that it's impossible, but it's maybe less prevalent than it would be in other environments that don't have a nod to that. So anyway.
And Murderous Rider. You always forget about that.
That's true. So
And
3
Legion's
cards,
Landing.
4 cards
And
with
Warden
lifelink.
of the First Tree.
Okay, that card... That card says lifelink if you get to 1,000,000 mana, in which case you should win the game, so I'm not worried about that one. Anyway, all to say, Scourge of the Skyclaves, the card has been really good for me, and so maybe worth reconsidering if you have a cube similar to mine, or maybe not. Just listen to me talk about how it works in my environment in a way that I didn't entirely anticipate. It's been cool.
Has anybody kicked it yet?
Not to my knowledge. It's a total of, 8 mana to kick it?
7, I think.
7 mana to kick it? It's a lot to kick it. I've never seen it happen. Couple other cards here that are unrelated to my recent Baneslayer pursuits. I added Embercleave sometime last year, somewhat skeptically. It's very much, I think, the definition of a win more card, right? Embercleave, for those that don't know, is 6 mana equipment. Let's see if I get all the rules text right. It's 4 red for an equipment with flash, and it costs 1 generic mana less to cast for each attacking creature you control. When it comes into play, you attach it to a creature you control, and it gets +1/+1 double strike and trample.
It also has equip 3 if you miss out on that initial auto equip, and it's legendary. Don't forget.
Sure. So this card, if you have a wide board of a bunch of creatures, and it's only 2, 3, even 4 mana, it's a huge beating. And this card was really prevalent in Standard when it was legal there. It's a very powerful card if you get to do the thing. Historically, I don't love these kinds of win more cards where if you are at parity or behind, the card kind of does nothing or is really overcosted for what it's supposed to do. And that's definitely kind of true of the card, right? It is definitely the kind of card that still does play a lot better if you're ahead. I'll say that I don't think at parity exists when this card is in play. It really changes what parity means when you can put this on one of your creatures. And something I've been pleasantly surprised by is that it can, more so than any other equipment in my entire cube, turn any dinky little token into a huge game-ending threat. Or, huge is maybe not the right word, but into a real threat that can end the game in such a way that when it is in play, that 3 mana equip feels actually pretty cheap, right? Like, if you've gotten to the point where it's in play, you get to start equipping it to stuff. I can kill your thing with it on it, and next turn you're just going to put something else onto double strike and trample, and it becomes a big problem. And I like that inevitability. I like that it does bring the game to a conclusion. It's also the closest thing I have to a combo with Stoneforge Mystic in my cube. I don't have Batterskull, I don't have Cauldron, I don't have any of that stuff. And the fact that you can guaranteed put this into play for cheap with Stoneforge Mystic is really cool. I've seen players take advantage of that. What I really want to note is that this has made people really excited to play the kind of deck that wants Embercleave, more than any other card in my cube, I think. And I don't think it's anywhere near the best card for an aggressive red deck, but it is by far the one that pound for pound, the players in our playgroup are most excited about. They'll take it early and they'll say, I want to build a deck where Embercleave is good. And I think that's worth a lot.
Yeah, I mean, historically, you really don't like combat tricks, though. How do you rationalize that? Is it just like it just does enough to get over your distaste for combat tricks? Or...
Again, my distaste for combat tricks is largely the floor being unplayable.
Interesting. Okay.
So I do have, Rimrock Knight. I have Embercleave. I have other things I can't remember right now that do Wandering Emperor, that do like combat trick related kind of stuff. But importantly for me, they always have a floor where it's not like, oops, I have no creatures, so I guess the other half of my deck is useless.
I mean, to be fair, this is still useless if you have no creatures, but I feel like that is... Yeah, what is the difference? Because it still does nothing if you have no creatures.
The difference is timing, I think, right? Like the blow-up potential of a combat trick is way higher in the negative way, where like you go to put a combat trick on your creature, they just remove it, now your whole spell is countered, does nothing. The fact that this sticks around and still has all of that value if you draw a creature later or whatever, I think is worth something.
Sure, I guess I see that.
And also the fact that it, grants the power and toughness boost and the keyword abilities over many turns instead of just in that one moment, right? If we were to imagine a combat trick that just gives +1/+1 double strike and trample, which is that almost exactly the text of what's the combat trick that Infect used to play for a long Temur Battle Rage? I think it's basically what Temur Battle Rage does, pretty close to it. So yeah, I've liked that card. I think it actually kind of fills a similar role to some of these other quote-unquote Baneslayers we've been talking about, in that it's pretty easy to blank this card and make it not that good, but the ceiling is really high, and it gets people excited, right? Like, people are excited to take that and just play it. And to me, that is really important. Like, I think having a card people get excited about to pull them into a deck is valuable. And I would say, other than Embercleave, there really isn't that in my cube right now for, like, an aggressive red deck.
I don't know if that's true. I mean, you still have stuff like Sulfuric Vortex and things like that.
That card has not been in my cube for
Really?
years and years and years. The closest I have to it is Eidolon of the Great Revel. People aren't excited to play Eidolon of the Great Revel. So, I mean, the card is, I think, better than Embercleave in your aggressive red deck, but I don't see people being like, ooh, Eidolon, I'm going to slam this first pick and then go for it. People do that with Embercleave all the time. And this honestly could just be people will get tired of Embercleave and then they'll start ignoring it too, and then I just swap it out for the new hotness, right? Whatever people gets people excited. Sticking with red for a second, Bedlam Reveler is a card that I added back to my cube last year at some point that has been, I think, also pretty fun. I was thinking today, Anthony, we are doing this roto draft of your cube. We just wrapped up the picks, actually. We're getting ready to play some games. And I took Rixmanny Reveler very highly, which is a card I really like in the regular cube. I think Bedlam Reveler is just basically the Rixmanny Reveler for my environment. That's more appropriate for the Bud Magic cube power level compared to Rixmanny Reveler. The ceiling is way higher, right? It's 2 mana instead of 4 mana on the spectacle cost for Rixmanny Reveler if you have a full graveyard, and then you get a 3/4 prowess instead of just a dinky 2/2, and you still get to draw 3 cards. And I've seen this card multiple times be a 2 mana, 3/4 prowess, Muldrifter, draw 3, which is nuts. It does have this cost, right, of if you play it alongside delve spells like Murktide Region and Treasure Cruise, you play it alongside Grim Lavamancer, you play it alongside Dragon's Rage Channeler, cards that care about Delirium. Actually, that one's fine. That one's totally fine. That's a good combo. But it has this weird interaction where if you time things in a weird way, where you delve your yard away and then you draw your Bedlam Reveler, it can be pretty bad. The floor is kind of low on this card, but I think it's been worth it for the ceiling, and it is really fun when it works. And so I've been happy with that card. I was looking for more spells, mattery payoffs, and I think this is one of the more fun ones.
Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of fun, and I like it personally just because it does require some investment. It's not just a card that you put in every deck, and it asks you to sort of play your hand in a different way, and it is really fun to, draw Bedlam Reveler and be like, oh, I'm just going to, use these burn spells in a way that otherwise might not be optimal, but I know I have this backup plan that's going to just generate a lot more value in the long term.
Right, that's what I'm excited about. So in our regular Cube Rotisserie draft, I took bounce spells pretty highly, more highly than I would have expected if you had asked me at the beginning of the draft, how highly do you value a Fading Hope and Into the Royal? Because I think those cards are fantastic, just cheap spells that affect the board, even if it's temporary, when I want to get my hand empty so I can draw 3 more with Rixmanny Reveler and just keep going. So I'm excited about that. Reveler's been cool. Do want to give a brief shout out to Third Path Iconoclast too. I know when we talked about this, I knew it was a card that aligned with all my favorite play patterns. I think I even said it was pandering to me, and that was part of the reason I didn't like it necessarily. It felt like it was a card designed for me and my cube. The other thing I didn't love about it is that I wondered if it would just be a young Pyromancer 2 that happens to be in red-blue, and I can say pretty confidently that almost every time I've seen it in play, the ways in which it's different from young Pyromancer have really mattered, namely that it triggers on non-creature spells and that it makes artifact-based tokens. It kind of honestly has made a whole new kind of little sub-theme of a deck that has come together a few times, which plays Iconoclast alongside a lot of the 1-mana cantripping or otherwise artifacts I include, like your Sensei's Divining Top or Chromatic Star or whatever. And then oftentimes also as Urza Saga. Those 2 cards have a really great interaction where your cheap artifacts with Third Path Iconoclast you're happy to have anyway, and they're also part of your Urza Saga package now. Honestly, it has me looking for another little artifact payoff for my cube because of how that has kind of spawned a little bit of a variation of a deck all unto itself, where that deck doesn't even really want Young Pyromancer. I mean, it still has some spells. You maybe still play it in some cases, but a lot of times that deck is really optimizing Third Path Iconoclast in a way that Young Pyromancer wouldn't really be anywhere near as good. I'm thinking about maybe adding Emry. What are your Emry thoughts?
I think Emry's super cool. I'm curious how it'll play out because I feel like it's one of those cards that when people talk about traps in the MTGO cube, they talk about Emry. It's like, this card looks super cool, not actually that good. So I wonder if you can actually...
What does the MTGO cube have for it? I guess Lotus is what they want you to do with it, pretty much.
Yeah, that seems powerful.
But that's peak. Hey, guess what? The synergy doesn't matter here. The card is just powerful.
No, the synergy does matter. Come on.
Yeah, I think honestly with one more... I've been thinking of adding Aether Spellbomb. I mean, it's on color with Emry. It is another card for the package with Urza Saga. It triggers Third Path Iconoclast. I think that card, honestly, can totally hang here. It's been a favorite in the regular cube. It's been a favorite in the Degenerate Micro Cube. It might also belong here, too. It's a really cool card. I think with that, I don't need anything else maybe to support Emry. I already have all the little artifacts that work with Luris, like the baubles and the things for the package for the Urza Saga, so I wonder if there's enough there that it's actually okay. It's definitely not the kind of card where you're going to be able to reliably turn 2 cast a 1-mana Emery, because your deck is not going to be that full of artifacts in my environment.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we also see more and more, just with the way they've been printing colored artifacts, there's often just incidental things that end up being
Especially
artifacts.
in white. I mean, I think I mentioned this on the set review episode where we were talking about our own cube editions for Phyrexia All Be One. If you look at my white section, I've got like Esper Sentinel, Lion Sash, I'm adding Glimmer Lens, I've got Dancing Sword, and
Portable Hole could come up every once in a while.
Portable Hole. So there's a lot of like incidental artifacts running around. We're like, yeah, could you build a cool tempo deck with it's mostly like white aggression with like a Urza Saga package and an Emery and some other like little payoffs in there? I hope that could be kind of cool. So in the spirit of, also just trying out cards like Torens, Fist of the Angels and whatnot, I think I'm going to give Emery a try and just see if it works. Because the card is really cool, I think, when it does actually do its thing.
I mean, you know which one I really want to use it with is Baleful Strix.
Yeah, I mean, that rules too. All right, last card from the Bun Magic Cube. I've been looking for an excuse to talk about somewhere, Anthony, and that is Dress Down. Dress Down has been so incredibly fun in this cube. I feel stupid for overlooking it initially. So for those that don't know, this is a 1 and a blue for an enchantment with flash. You sacrifice it at the end of the turn. When it enters the battlefield, you draw a card, and it says, creatures lose all abilities. I read this initially, and I was like, okay, this is clearly like a specific hate piece for some constructed something. I'm not even sure what it was maybe designed to stop. Maybe even just the Evoke Elementals. I have no idea sort of what context they thought this card was going to be played in. It's showed up in a decent amount of constructed because it does have a lot of weird edge cases where it answers stuff. I, for my own cube, looked at it and was like, that's a very complicated way to say draw a card, which is what I thought it would do 99% of the time. Well, that's an exaggeration. I thought maybe 80% of the time it would just cycle and you wouldn't get any value off of it because I don't have a ton of activated abilities in my cube. It's mostly a cube where you like attack and block. And I was like, well, for a combat-based cube with attacking and blocking, this doesn't really do a whole lot. But it just does. It always does something. The ceiling is very high on it, and it's one of the most fun like little mini games I can remember playing in Magic in recent years, is trying to figure out the best way to get value off of my Dress Down. Because every time you have it in your hand, there's like multiple different ways you can use it to get value off of it. Do you want to like try and stifle somebody's development by flashing it in on their upkeep when they have some mana dorks in place, and now they can't cast what they thought they were going to be able to cast because their cards don't tap for mana anymore. I used it to shut off a mana dork and a Augur of Autumn against you on stream once. That was just basically kind of a time walk. Like, you had a whole plan for that turn, and I was like, well, now you can't play cards off the top, and also you can't use your mana dork, and you're like, pass? I have nothing I can do then.
Yeah, that really wrecked my day.
And then, obviously it has the really high ceilings of Stonecoil Serpent or something that you would cast. It just has no abilities now. It enters with no counters on it. Like, it's a really cool card that has a really wide range of things it can do, and playing with it has been really fun. On top of that, the floor is fine, right? It is just 2 mana draw card. It really helps with Delirium. It's in a color that is happy to play instant speed effects because you're often holding up counter magic. So if you don't need to counter something, end of turn, you just play your Dress Down and then draw your card. You can also do the sort of thing where you play it during your end step because it gets sacrificed at the beginning of the next end step. So you can just play it on your opponent's end step. Then you untap and you just play Uro. And you don't get the trigger, but also it doesn't go to the graveyard because it's now you just got a 3-mana 6/6 that the next turn will have its abilities back and you can start bashing with.
Yeah, I was going to ask, we mentioned Death Shadow. Have you seen anybody just, attack with like a 3/3 Death Shadow and then Dress Down?
I haven't, but these are all the cool things that it can do. And I'm going to have it in my cube for a long time, long enough that I hope that happens because it's just been a really cool and fun card. So
put that on your bingo card?
Put that on my bingo card. I want someone to kill somebody with using Dress Down. See, you said I don't like combat tricks. Dress Down is a beautiful combat trick. It actually is.
I mean, it kind of is.
It actually is a combat trick, genuinely.
Like somebody attacks with a flyer and you Dress Down and then you can
get rid
block
of flying, get
rid
rid of first strike, get rid of
Turns out, creatures have a lot of abilities.
Yeah, so I overlooked it because I just thought that I wasn't playing like a combo-oriented cube where the abilities of my creatures were super relevant. It was more about combat. But a lot of those abilities care about combat, and just finding a way to get value off of this card has been so fun. So that's my little letter of approval to Dress Down. Have you got to cast this yet? Was it in your Roto Draft deck?
I feel like I did play it somewhere, and I didn't manage to do anything cool with it.
Maybe it was in your Blue-White Control deck we played on stream or something.
That sounds right,
remember.
Yeah.
I recommend it, though. It's very fun and cool.
So I mentioned that maybe my updates to the regular cube have been slowing down a little bit. I feel like honestly it's just in a pretty good place.
Did it finish the cube?
Did it. The cube is over. I think it's just like it plays pretty well. I feel like I've achieved over the last, how long have I had this cube now? Many years. Kind of achieved the goals of creating this like limited type environment where there's lots of little overlapping synergies, and it just plays pretty well. The biggest change that I have made recently is, like I've mentioned, we upped the cube size up to 450, and this was really just for logistical reasons. We have been running this local cube night every week, and we always just have a different number of people, so having a cube that can support 10 people gives us a little bit more flexibility. And, you know, those logistics I think are important, like the context for what you're going to do with the cube matters a lot. So because of that, I did end up making a bigger update and kind of just threw in a bunch of stuff from my collection, just kind of went through the box and found things that I thought could be interesting.
That's how we got a Hackrobat in the cube, which
exactly.
is kind of an odd one that you're
happened.
Like, is this card good or fun or synergistic?
I do like Hackrobat. It's a card that I've always thought is pretty cool, but yeah.
It's fine. I mean, I played it in a deck, and it
okay, great,
it's
great.
a decent card. It's just, it's funny because it doesn't strike me as like a regular cube style card, and also doesn't really have any obvious synergies with anything. It definitely strikes me as a card where you're like, you're looking through stacks of cards, you're like, well, I have to add 20 more. This one's fine.
But I also took that opportunity just to add a little things that are a little bit more speculative. So I did Bring to Light, this blue-green card that tutors something, and that's also not really a regular cube card in terms of the aesthetics of the cube. There's not a lot of tutoring.
I like it.
But it is kind of cool. The other thing I've been thinking about is green has pretty much everyone in the play group agreed is kind of the worst color, which I don't put that much stock into. I don't think it's like a failure of the cube to have some color be the worst color.
Some color's going to be the worst color.
Some color's got to be the worst color. And, you know, I think it's, if people
as soon as you buff green, everyone's going to be saying blue is the worst color.
Exactly, and I'm ready for it. But something more concrete that I realized is looking through the gold section of the cube, there are plenty of gold cards. I like gold cards, but a lot of the green gold cards just weren't as clear signposts. They didn't have much of an identity, or, you know, they just weren't as exciting to try and build around. So that's something specifically when I was going through my box of gold cards was, is there something else we can do just to make these color pairs a little bit more appealing? So two of the cards that I've added that have been really, really impactful are Fires of Yavimaya and Bloodbraid Elf.
Yeah, baby.
These, I think we've had a bunch of green-red decks just crush the whole draft.
And you're also feeling the coming storm of being about ready to get crushed by Justin Parnell's Roto draft deck.
So hard.
I think I'm also going to get crushed.
His deck looks scary. But what I think is interesting is that I don't know that people are winning just on the back of these two cards. Yes, they are powerful, and
you're not going to draw them every game,
but you're not going to draw them every game. So it's like the cards that are relevant to making a good red-green deck, which is probably, you know, a Lightning Strike and a
Saddled Rhymestag.
Saddled Rhymestag. Those were already there. You could have combined those pieces, but there just wasn't necessarily an entry point that got people to really think, you know, during the draft, this is a reason for me to get into this red-green deck. So I think that's been an interesting sort of journey, is thinking about, are there entry points? Are there ways into getting into a certain color pair? And while that's been really successful, I think, with red-green, maybe a little bit too much even, and I might reevaluate some of those cards at some point down the line. Some of the other color pairs that I kind of threw some things in haven't been as effective. Coiling Oracle's cool, but it's not really putting people in a direction.
That's not a like big power outlier.
Shardless Agent is a cool one that I added again with this batch.
I think that actually is very good.
It's cool, but is it cool enough?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this environment, it's probably similar power level to Bloodbraid Elf. It's just a question of, is that what you want to be doing in blue-green? And that's what I don't know is the answer.
Yeah.
Because red-green does have an identity here, if people were ignoring it, which is just that it's a beatdown color pair.
Right.
And it has been for a long time in this cube, so Bloodbraid Elf fits perfectly into that strategy. The question is, what does blue-green want to be doing? And I still don't have a great answer to that in this environment, but I don't immediately feel like it involves Shardless Agent.
Yeah, I mean, so these are the two color pairs that I think are the least resolved, are blue-green and green-black. I think, again, you can have successful decks. I think, if anything, we've seen the blue-green decks that are effective are more like a green deck that's playing blue for some card draw. To sort of, for Muldrifter to kind of shore up, like, give you something to do in the late game to actually close out the game. And then, potentially at that point, it's more just like a 5-color green deck that's splashing a couple other things. Black-green, I don't know that we've seen that many decks drafted at all from it, which is
I can't really think of one.
And the thing that I think is worth mentioning about this is that it's very easy to look at that and say, well, this is a huge problem with the cube. There's like this mistake here. But it's not like people were out there drafting green-black decks and saying, oh, you know, I've failed. Like, the cube wasn't here to support me and this archetype is incomplete. People just don't draft it. And it's like, okay, that's fine. And I think there's still a lot of diversity in the way that you can build other color pairs, that it's not like there's this huge limitation.
Yeah, I think it's totally fine to have a color pair people aren't playing. Who cares? If anything, you could see it as some potential design space, right? If you want to add more stuff, that is some space you could do it, because you could look at the green, black, gold cards, or any cards you might include in those color pairs that are kind of meant for whatever strategy it's supposed to be playing, and say that, well, if these cards aren't seeing play, then those are slots that I could be using in some other way. And that could be to make a different kind of green-black strategy, or it could be to do something totally different for those two colors, and maybe you just cut your green, black, gold cards, and who cares? I don't really like this color pair. This is not a color pair I expect people to play in this cube in isolation. Either of the solutions is fine, and also you can just find to just leave it. It's not a problem. Yeah. It's just maybe a potential opportunity, if anything.
I mean, we can't cut all the black-green cards because we can't cut Slimefoot, right?
I think a good goal would be to make Slimefoot a high pick in this cube.
It used to be worse. It was actually so bad when I first built the cube that I cut it, and then after cutting some of the other big power outliers, I ended up adding it back. And I've actually played it a couple times. We've said that we've never seen a black-green deck. That's not totally true. I've definitely played some Slimefoot decks, but they are
was it like
just
a 3 or 4 color deck that happened to have Slimefoot?
I think a little bit, yeah. Which is, just I think maybe something that's been tricky. Green has always been the most difficult color in this cube because I haven't really been trying to promote like a ramp strategy. So if anything, green is kind of like the mana fixing color, but not so much mana ramp.
Yeah, I think honestly, and you say it's a problem. The problem is just that people did not know what to do with it, right?
Right.
It's not that you were lacking a sense of what to do with green. You had a pretty clear sense of what you wanted to do with green from the beginning. It's that people were like, why do I want Pell Collector in a deck? Or, whatever. And it's because they were expecting green to be ramp because it is in so many environments.
Yeah, so I mean, I wonder a little bit with green-black if it's similar to the green-white and green-red color pairs, which are, have a more clear identity of being proactive. Maybe green does have this potential deck that's much more about, combining the removal from black and the sort of more attrition-based cards, or, ways to beat that attrition game from green with stuff like Slimefoot, but it's just not there in a package that's appealing enough that players are actually combining those tools together.
I think it's entirely possible there's a successful deck there. People just don't know how to get into drafting. We'd be remiss not to mention that I think green-black is a color pair that a lot of people have struggled with in Cube over the years, especially at higher power levels, because if you just combine green threats and black removal, you get like a control deck that can't ever beat a control deck with blue in it, pretty much, because you don't have the same level of card quality and or card selection, rather, and card advantage. And so you end up playing like a weird, kind of rock-style mid-range deck that's not fast enough to beat the control decks. Maybe it has a middle game plan that can beat an aggro deck, but otherwise it's kind of just not well-positioned against the rest of the field. So that's the thing people have definitely, I think, struggled with over the years, is just that those colors combine in a way that, you get their two natural strengths don't necessarily make for a game plan, I guess is what I mean. Whereas when you combine other colors, their natural strengths oftentimes have kind of a cohesive plan, right? You combine white and red strengths, you're going to be playing an aggressive deck.
Right.
You combine blue and black strengths, you're going to be playing a controlling deck because you want the removal and you want the ability to draw cards and have card selection to find what you need when you need it. Combine black and green and you're like, I have a good stuff deck that has good cards from both black and green, threats and removal. It's basically like a plussed up limited deck.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to have any of the synergies, or at least without you intentionally baking it in, it's not going to have the inherent synergies that, blue-red just kind of ends up being a tempo-y Spellslinger deck, right? We see it in every single core set since the beginning of time, right? That's so often what that color pair does, because that's kind of what the color pair promotes. What does black-green promote? It promotes like a good stuff mid-range strategy, which can oftentimes have a much lower ceiling, I think, than a more synergistic plan.
Yeah, I mean, I think a plussed-up limited deck is a good way to think about it, because I think this is also an experience for lots of people when they play Cube for the first time. It was certainly my first experience playing Cube was, I'm just going to take, big threats and removal. That's what I know is good in Magic, because I was coming from the context of playing a lot of limited and did horribly in the draft. And it was really funny to then, like, a week later, listen to LSV on Limited Resources talk about, this is what happens the first time you draft Cube, is you're going to draft
green Planeswalkers and Doomblades, and you're like, I can't lose, except you can.
Can't win, and it's such a weird experience that is somewhat universal. But I think in this Cube, you actually can do that a little bit of just, draft the
yeah, I think removal. It's kind of viable. I think what it lacks is like an identity that people are like, exactly, I know what I'm doing, whereas your other colors do have that identity.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I could see doing more stuff with just, repeated value engines with things like Waker of the Wilds, a card that doesn't get played that much, Squirrel Nest, which also doesn't get played that much, just ways to actually grind out a long game and combine that with the efficient removal.
I would love to see more payoffs for playing a card like Winding Constrictor, which I know why Winding Constrictor is in. I can put myself in your head. I know why Winding
Okay.
Constrictor is in there.
Get in my
It's
head.
a 2-mana 2/3. It's fine. The floor is fine, and you can have this upside of interacting with counters where like it makes other cards slightly better, but you do not want there to be like a +1/+1 counter deck that's in the entire environment, which I think
it just should tilt you a little bit to that direction where it's like, oh, okay, we have a couple Hydras here. We have a couple combat tricks that use counters. There are ways to make this card better, but it's not just, the signpost for it. This is all about what this color pair is about.
which I think is similar to your rationale behind something like Fiery Temper, where Fiery Temper is the madness lightning bolt that you can cast for 1 red. I think your logic is probably that 1 red deal 3 to anything is very good here, and it's
fine.
But the relative paucity of discard outlets and also of ways to put counters on things, I think does lead to a little bit of like disappointment in those cards, right? Where even though they're totally playable as on their baseline, right? Like a 2-mana 2/3 is just fine in this environment. I've seen it with Soul Diviner. I've seen it with Sylvan Advocate. That stat line is just good. So if you can cast Winding Constrictor, you just should. But the fact that there's so much unrealized potential, I think, leads it to be underrated or just kind of a bummer compared to what it could potentially be. And I wonder if you couldn't just inject 5 or 10% more support for those kinds of cards and still not go all the way to the point of like your black-green deck is just counters and that's all it cares about and it's like on rails. I think you could go a little further to support that in a way that maybe would actually motivate players to like see the payoffs, right?
Yeah.
See that there is a deck there or there is a way to get this fringe benefit off these cards to make them first pickable, right? To make Winding Constrictor a card where you take it and say like, I'm going to make this work, and that's going to be one of the things that's going to pull me into this deck.
Add more counters. Interesting.
What?
There are a lot of counters here already. There's 64 cards that reference +1/+1 counters, which is like 15% of the cube.
How many in green and black?
A bunch in green, not as many in black. And the ones that are in black are all a little bit more narrow. This is kind of a zombie payoff, or this is part of this artifact sacrifice thing, which...
I mean, like we said, maybe that deck is there. Maybe that card is good and people just don't know and haven't figured out how to draft it yet.
Which honestly is fine. It's funny there are things that just kind of can fly under the radar and not feel like a problem and not be a problem. It's not like people are like, I drafted this card and it was a huge trap and I feel like I train wrecked my draft because of this. That's not happening. So
yeah.
I don't know that there is necessarily a problem, but like you're saying, there could be just more space where we could really optimize for having more diversity of different decks and experiences.
There's also a question of the quality of threats. And I know there are a lot of good green cards that care about +1/+1 counters that are high picks in this cube. But when it comes to like the discard outlets, I do have a small, as big of a madness theme as you can possibly have in this cube. I have both madness cards in red in my blue red deck, and the discard outlets largely are like not cards I want to be playing on power level. And so the chance of combining Thrill of Possibility with my Fiery Temper, that upside is just not worth it to me to put Thrill of Possibility in my deck,
I do love Thrill of Possibility, though. So we did a draft of this last week, and I struggled in the draft. I wouldn't say I train wrecked, but I was...
You thought you did.
Stretching for playables. I had, exactly the number of playables.
And literally 0 dual lands.
And literally, it was not my best draft. But what was funny is, like, when I say I was stretching for playables, I was playing like a main deck, Disenchant, a Thrill of Possibility, and the Claim the Firstborn without having any synergy with it, just because I needed cards.
Claim's just a good card. I don't care what people say.
All 3 of those cards were just fine. Like, I was just really happy to pitch my 5th land all the time. I was happy to claim the Firstborn things and find ways to close out games or use my opponent's creatures that could sacrifice themselves. So I do kind of like...
But fine is not what pulls people into... Like, you don't take Thrill of Possibility because it's fine. You take it because you want to do something cool with it, right?
Sure.
I don't know. I feel like if there was, I took Frantic Search, which I think it's kind of a broken discard outlet, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like Frantic Search is messed up. If there's something in between, maybe the Thrill of Possibility and the Frantic Searches, and I'm not sure what's in that space. I haven't looked at it, but that's the other thing I'm saying about the +1/+1 counters, right? If I take Winding Constrictor, but then the next 3 most powerful green-black cards I see are all something I care about, something totally different, and it's like, well, I could take this C- that is good with Winding Constrictor, or this card that's an A- or a B+, I'm just going to take the A- and B+, and then
yeah,
feel
turning
like
that
that's
C- into a C or a C+ just isn't enough to actually make interesting decision space. It's like still not close.
Right.
The other thing I did a little bit, so I also added some of the cards that have been in my backlog from recent sets, cards that really stand out to me as regular cube cards, things like Scrapwork Mutt, Rabbit Battery, Cut Down, Recruitment Officer. These are kind of things that have sort of been lingering. I also added just a couple more blue cards just because, I don't try and keep the counts of cards exactly even between different colors, but I just kind of eyeball it. I'm like, that column's a little short. Let's add a couple more over there.
Yeah, I use it as a tiebreaker, basically. If I'm like, well, I'm going to cut one of these cards, and I'll look at the counts and be like, oh, I'm actually kind of heavy on red cards right now or whatever.
So I threw in Quicken, which was also a recommendation of yours, and Portent and Remand just to shore up the blue section a little bit. And I think those have all played out fine. Like,
I love all
you can
those
always
cards.
just have more cantrips. There is a little bit of, there's some spells payoff, so those cards are always going to do stuff and be relevant.
Remand is one of my favorite Magic cards ever, maybe. So simple, so cool, has so many weird edge case applications. It's great.
Yeah.
I
was kind of hoping to pick it up for my rotisserie draft just so I could get multiple artifact cast triggers.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, the similarity between Remand and, like, Dress Down, they're very similar in their play patterns. Mm-hmm. It's just that Dress Down is like a pile of complicated rules text that's dumb, and Remand is beautifully clean. Like, the fact that Dress Down has to be an enchantment that self-sacrifices and blah, 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 compared to Remand's, like, 2.5 lines of rules text, which is beautiful. But they play very similarly in that they have really cool, wide arrays of applications with a very good floor that I love.
And I think it scales well with the environment. It's never going to be totally broken, but it's always going to have applications. So that's kind of where I'm at with regular Cube. I feel like there's still a lot of space where this could continue to be tuned and focus more on these particular areas that we've been talking about. But overall, I think that it feels kind of settled, and I kind of want to just focus my Cube energy on trying something a little bit different and maybe working on my next Cube.
Fair. You finished Cube. Good job.
Finished Cube. It's done.
I'll let you know when I get there. I'm jealous. I had a couple little updates here for the Degenerate Micro Cube. Maybe I'll just summarize by saying that I added sideboard-only cards into that cube, like stuff that you just probably will never main deck because it's literally unplayable in some circumstances, like your Veil of Summers and, your Blue Elemental Blast and stuff like that. But those have been fun. I think that it leans into what that environment is already kind of about, which sideboarding is already a huge deal there because you can totally transform your deck with a few swaps, and so I made the packs bigger to accommodate them. I didn't cut existing cards. I just said, let's draft more and include more sideboard cards. And that's been fun.
Less micro all the time.
It's the micro refers to the deck size. We've been over this so many times.
Then it should be a Degenerate Micro Deck Cube.
Oh, that really rolls off the tongue.
It does, yeah.
The other card that I added semi-recently that was not related to, like, recent set additions was I added Karn the Great Creator, which is a card I've always wanted to be good there because there are a ton of matchup-specific artifacts and, like, little trinkety... Is there a word for, like, Chalice of the Void and Thorn of Amethyst? I guess spheres is what people call them. Like, little artifacts that are, like, hate pieces against specific strategies that means you can have a very good Karn sideboard in, like, any kind of deck. It's also a win condition in a late game because you just keep getting back whatever artifacts got exiled and then make them into creatures. The thing that was a problem for a while with that card is that people expected to want to play it in, like, a Shops deck, but you can't cast it with Shops. And so it's got this weird tension of, like, it's not an artifact, can't play with my Mishra's Workshop, but it wants to be in that sort of similar deck. And I think people have maybe gotten over that and realized that it's actually kind of a different card that makes a little bit of its own deck that can maybe just have a little bit of ramp instead of a Mishra's Workshop. Or you can play it along Mishra's Workshop. You just got other mana in there to cast it. And it's been a really cool addition that games do revolve around it a lot because shutting off all of your opponent's artifacts' activated abilities also shuts off all of their sideboard pieces that they brought in to try and make stuff irrelevant.
They really should have committed and just printed an artifact Planeswalker. I'm a little bit disappointed.
Yeah, why not? I mean, who cares?
Who
like,
cares?
He is a robot. He is an artifact.
Wizards. Who cares?
Does it just not fit on the type line? Is there some rules problem with it? I guess they didn't want you to be able to shatter someone's Planeswalker, but who cares?
There's probably something broken with it where, I mean, yeah, with Mishra's Workshop, but also stuff that can tutor artifacts. Maybe there were specific interactions they didn't want.
I feel like they just didn't want to turn every single destroy target artifact into destroy this Planeswalker, but
commission another frame.
I think it's cool. Yeah, those are updates to our cubes. Little potpourri episode for you. We are going to end on a listener-submitted Pack 1 Pick 1. This week's pack comes to us from listener Jared. It is his cube, the Bird Box, and it's a Pauper cube. One of the special rules modifications here is that all the basics are snow basics, and it's named after his cat, Bird. We've actually done a pick from this other cube named after his dog Mozart before, so, the algorithm seems to like Jared.
And the algorithm, I should state, is designed to not favor people if they've submitted multiple cubes. It balances for that, so, yeah, I guess it just likes these cubes.
Sometimes you roll snake eyes. Or double sixes, I guess. I don't want to imply that Jared is a bad roll. Anyway, I'm going to read the pack, and Anthony's going to tell us what he's looking at. The cards are Snowhorn Rider, Body Dropper, Coiling Oracle, Silver Flame Squire, Makeshift Munitions, Compulsive Research, Jackal Pup, Maria's Outrider, Quombodge Witches, Burn Bright, Aven Liberator, Dogged Pursuit, Farseek, Manowar, and Kasali Pride Mage.
Really strong finish on that pack. Manowar and Kasali Pride Mage are just two of my all-time favorite cards. Can I just take both of those?
Are you going to take one of them?
I don't know. I'm tempted to take the Pride Mage, but starting a gold card here seems risky.
I think all the best cards are gold cards, to me at least. Like, the safe pickups are like, you could take a Farseeker or Compulsive Research and be like, sure, I'll play this no matter what color I'm in, but neither is particularly interesting or like a power outlier. I think the power outliers are Pride Mage and Body Dropper, honestly.
Body Dropper is also a pretty cool card. Sure, you can talk me into it. I'll take a Pride Mage.
All right, I'll take a Body Dropper then, and we'll see which deck is better supported, the Sacrifice deck or the Exalted deck?
No, that's the thing. Is Pride Mage is just great.
Pride Mage is just generically good.
It's just great. Exalted is such a cool mechanic. I really like it.
Yeah, Body Dropper is a red and a black for a 2/2 Devil Warrior. When you sacrifice another creature, put a +1/+1 counter on it. And you can pay a black and a red and sacrifice another creature to give it menace until end of turn. I think the triggered ability here is the more relevant thing. Just a 2/2 for 2 that grows as you sacrifice stuff seems really good. Honestly, it could be a regular cube card as far as I'm concerned. So we don't need to boost that archetype.
Yeah, that's the thing, is I definitely like this card, and I looked at it, but yeah, I mean, part of it is context, and I don't necessarily want to add even more support to red-black sacrifice.
Yeah. Pride Mage.
I love it. I don't know if it's the right pick, but I'm feeling okay about my deck so far.
I get Makeshift Munitions and Weaponize the Monsters confused in my head sometimes, and I'm always disappointed at how much worse Makeshift Munitions seems. I get that you're supposed to like sacrifice treasure tokens and like dinky artifacts, and that's what's supposed to make it comparable, but boy, is it worse than Weaponize the Monsters. So that's an uncommon, so couldn't even see playing this cube anyway. All right, Jared, we've covered both of your pets now on our Pack 1 Pick 1, so gotta get more pets, I guess. More pets and more cubes.
We've also been working on a bunch of other little stuff in the background. We've updated the commander map, so if you have a commander deck hosted on one of the sites that EDHREC ingests, you can now actually just paste in a link to your cube and actually find your cube on the map, which is pretty exciting. You keep saying your
cube instead of your deck.
Yeah.
I do it all the time, too.
It's deck. It's okay. They just listened to a whole episode about cube. They know that my tendency is
cube, deck, interchangeable. We all know this.
Same thing. A commander deck is just a little cube that you just draw from. So check that out. I've also been expanding the still untitled list formatter, which is, we'll link it in the show notes. It's linked on the resources page. You can now, if you put in a list of cards or search for a list of cards on Scryfall, download a set of images from Scryfall of your choice if you want the art crops or the large or small images or whatever. So just working hard to try and make a thing that makes other people do less repetitive computer work with Magic.
The dream. The dream of every computer engineer is to make a thing that saves people repetitive work, which is unfortunately so often the reality of software we build. But
it's true.
Yeah, it's a great little way to just manage lists of Magic cards. So if you have any reason, and it's hard to market it for lack of a better word, because what do you do with it? Well, whatever you could possibly want to do with a list of Magic cards. But, you know, if you are trying to take a list of cards and get all of their sets for some reason, or you need to...
That's a good example.
So hard to think of examples, but I do use it myself sometimes, and we have other people that have definitely been big fans of it, so yeah, you should check it out if you ever need to transform Magic data.
Yeah, that's the thing, is you don't need to go look at it now and use it, because you probably don't have a use
case.
Just know if you're ever like, I'm doing this repeatedly. I keep like looking up the color identity for this card and pasting into the spreadsheet. Maybe this can help you.
Yeah. Maybe one of the best use cases for our audience, honestly, is like if you do want to use like graphing tools in Google Sheets or Excel, you can go pull a spreadsheet with whatever data you want of the cards in your cube, which I guess you can probably pull most of that stuff from the CSV you can download from Cube Cobra, but this is configurable, so you can get rid of things you don't care about and make sure you add everything you do care about. Anything that's in Scryfall's data, basically.
Yeah, I mean, I use it a lot for, like, we just did this rotisserie draft, and just getting the list of the cube with all the appropriate columns so that I can have the colors and stuff in that template for the rotisserie draft. That's super useful, just grabbing metadata for card pages and stuff like that. I also just built another little tool in my quest to cut down on people doing repetitive work. Built a little tool to build set cubes. So
right,
if
set
you're
cube builder. This is a great one.
In starting a set cube, you want to have a set cube as a starting point to import into Cube Cobra to build it. You can choose the set you want and the exact number of duplicates for each rarity, and it'll build you a CSV that's exactly formatted to import into Cube Cobra, so you can create that, import it to Cube Cobra, and use that as a starting point for your cube.
Yeah, that's a great tool. That's a great little, like, it's kind of like the list formatter with a little bit of extra stuff on top to let you
can do it
multiples.
in like 6 steps with the list formatter. You can do it in 1 step with this, which is better, I guess.
Yeah, another great thing
easier
that
to understand.
You listener probably don't need this right now, but you should know it exists.
Just
if
know
you ever
it
go to make a
exists.
set cube, just know you can do this without having to tediously. I mean, how do people do it now? It never even occurred to me what it would be like to make a set cube. Do you just have to like? It sounds tedious as heck. Like,
yeah, I mean, I mentioned this to Aaron, a buddy in our local group who just recently made a set cube, and he was like, "Oh man, I wish I had that 3 weeks ago."
you would have saved me 2 nights of my life.
Exactly. I mean, the way I would have done it before is going to Scryfall, going to the table view, copying and paste into a spreadsheet, and then grab. It was a little bit tedious. But these are the kinds of things that I end up using the list formatter for a bunch. Is you can do a lot of these things that might take a couple clicks, but a lot less than if you have to do stuff manually.
Might take a couple clicks, or like futzing around with the inspector in Scryfall, or stripping out extra stuff that it copied you didn't want to copy. Anyway, cool resources over at luckypaper.co.
Check them out.
And that's it for this episode. Thanks for tuning in. All of our music is produced by DJ James Nasty. All the magic cards are produced by Wizards of the Coast. This show is produced by Anthony and I, thinking really hard about magic cards and then speaking into microphones about it. We get to go to Philly now, Anthony. This is coming out after our Philadelphia trip, but I'm excited for it.
I'm really excited as well. It's going to be a ton of fun. We're going to play a lot of Cube. I'm a little nervous for this panel, but
I only found out this week that this event is twice as big as Magic Vegas was, so that's surprising.
Great.
You'll
shocking. Do great. I'm sure I'll do fine.
You're going to do great too, but I have to make sure that I do great because I'm hosting it.
There's a lot of pressure on you there.
If you're not doing great, I'll just make everyone else talk. It'll be fine. It's going to be great.